Okay, what's up? Welcome to the Katie Black Show. Today I'm honored. I have with me
Sam Simmons.
What's up, Sam? How are you doing?
I'm honored.
Oh, this is like big for me. So,
The Katie Black Show. So I'm going to be like reposting this and putting it everywhere.
yes. And I'll get to this in a little later, but I wore my Backstreet Boys shirt.
So you're Backstreet, not NSYNC?
Yes, but only by like, if I had to like pull my arm in shoes. I was
Right.
never like,
Does it have to ever be an either or? I always felt like that. Can't we just love both for the pure joy that they still bring to everybody?
absolutely. They're the same. Or it's funny, have you seen the Lou Pearlman documentary on Netflix?
No, but I know, like, yeah.
You know all the stuff.
Yeah. Lou's not a good person.
Yeah.
Wasn't a good person.
Yeah. But basically, no, I say that because it was like, for so long they like were rivals, and then it's like, oh, they were from like the same family. They were from the same.
It's like, but it's cyclical because in the '80s you had like New Edition and it was just prefabricated, or not prefabricated, but you had this person, manager, behind all of these boy bands back then. So it's always sort of one person or a couple people.
Absolutely.
So, and 98 Degrees is back together and touring. I don't know.
What do you think about that? Or what's your just 2 cents? Just, yeah.
I feel free to play it because it's not mine, it's Viacom's. But on the when I worked on TRL, my last day, as you know, with TRL, they used to retire videos after 65 airings. And on my last day, they made unbeknownst to me, a retirement video featuring all the inadvertent times I had gotten on camera, because I definitely did not want to do that, not intend to, but things would come up.
Uh-huh.
And one of them was when I accidentally wrote on Nick Lachey's arm with a Sharpie when I was trying to take notes on a cue card. So there's that whole thing. So
yeah, obviously my like pop culture brain is exploding. And if you're watching, we're gonna get into your career in life, but I'm obsessed with TRL, and you are connected, and that is why I reached out. But I always ask my guests, where did you grow up, or where were you born?
I grew up in Boston, the youngest of four kids, and always loved music, played music, always into pop culture as well. And then I went to Syracuse University to study anthropology and political science. Nothing to do with the field that I ended up in, but actually I think a lot to do with it, because I'm curious about different culture, and pop culture is of course culture, and it's just popular, but there are different ways to look at things, and also political science, which is really, I found it fascinating, still do. But from there went to New York City and have lived here my entire grown up life in New York, and started working in music publicity at Island Records, which was really cool. And then my boss at the time, knew somebody at MTV, and they were hiring, this is so long ago that I'm dating myself, but this show called Like We Care. And it was a daily teen magazine show. And they hired me as a story coordinator with no TV experience, to research story ideas. This is pre-internet, so you're looking at newspapers, calling up people, and it was awesome. It was so much fun, and I could pitch. We would pitch story ideas, like shop class. Let's spend time with a shop class in the middle of Iowa, and they'd be like, great. And then I'd send a producer out, they'd do it, and that was the idea. I'd do the pre-interview questions with the people, and from there, I never left television until now. But it was great. And I worked at MTV. I worked on the Jon Stewart show. And then back to MTV, TRL, and then MTV News and Docs. And from there went to a local sports network here in New York. Always doing content, always doing development, producing, and overseeing sort of programming. So,
Dude, like I'm saying,
little and big picture.
I have so many questions. But
I'll keep my answers short.
I know. So for just being at MTV, obviously, were all your friends holy shit, Or were you just not even listening to that?
No, it was, yeah. I
You know
still,
what I mean?
I remember I was living in New York, my first apartment with a roommate. It was really fun. We had an answering machine because this is again before all the cell phones. And I remember the message from the woman saying, this is blank. I'd love to have you come on board. And they hired me for like a 2-week trial, and then like another 2 weeks. Because it's so funny because I think like you never know if it's going to work out. I mean, you got to trust your gut.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, my friends were like, because this was like
Early
I
90s?
still think MTV was cool. Not that it's not cool now, but it really was. There wasn't, YouTube or anywhere else to go to get this type of entertainment and content.
Right.
And
Oh my God. It
so
was the like pulse. Yeah. I mean, I just feel like it's almost totally different. But we can.
it's totally different, and so you felt like it was cool. Like
Oh my God,
yeah,
it was like so cool. And I was like so young. It was like, it didn't matter. I don't think it mattered like what age. I feel like it was like maybe the first time there was like a network for like teenagers or like young adults.
if I reached out to somebody and said I'm calling from MTV, sometimes they thought it was a joke,
Mm-hmm.
and I guess you're in it, and I don't mean to take this lightly, but you're thinking like I just want to, I'm sincere and I'm earnest with what we want to do, and like tell interesting stories, but people still see MTV, and you're like, you don't sometimes realize it until you step out of it, and then people say, oh my God, and people still bring it up, like you, TRL, where I'm just like, it was part of what I did, and it was wonderful at the time, and then you sort of move on and you do different things, but it's still. I think everything you do shapes who you become, who you are, and that definitely shaped a lot of who I am. I'm just clicking the OK on the meeting being recorded. A great experience, and I work with, amazingly talented people. That everybody that I worked with at TRL, in the first when the show launched, they've all gone on to do like other incredible things besides that.
Do you, well, I guess before I get back into TRL, real quick, like in a nutshell, what was the Jon Stewart show on MTV like? What was that vibe?
That was really fun. I was working more in like the production management side of it when I started. So not the creative, but I really wanted to go back to the creative. It was great because no one knew what we were doing. And it was just trying to throw stuff at a wall and see if it sticks. And I remember we shot in his apartment. And this is like,
Oh, I don't know.
when he was still like, young and starting out and doing stand-up, like working the circuits and working really hard. And anybody that I think gets to that place, I don't think people always realize how much work they do and what it takes to doing, stand-up and doing every circuit. It's hard. I mean, I tried to do open mic for a little bit, and man, it's brutal. You're putting yourself out there. You're like, the hours are horrible, and you're working on new material and going out and practicing it. And Jon really practiced his craft, and seeing the evolution from doing like a talk show, that was definitely more pop culture at MTV. And again, the bands that came on were like insane because it's MTV. But also the comedy and the guests, and then it became syndicated. So we went from MTV to Paramount, which was MTV anyway. So, and that was for a year, and it was really cool. But you also see David Letterman came on the last show and said, "Don't equate cancellation with failure," and that was really important. David Letterman saying that. You're like, yeah, it's like, doesn't always mean the same. And we did something that was really fun. I was a writer's assistant, but I got to pitch stuff. It's a union show, but they still allowed me to write monologue jokes. I would go in every morning really early before anybody arrived and write my monologue jokes and pitch them with everybody else. So it was kind of like a really cool opportunity that I'm not sure, maybe, younger people would have that opportunity today, but I generally find, and I guess maybe this is like career advice, that like, don't be afraid to ask. No is always an answer. And if somebody lets you pitch, just, bust your ass and do it, and go in early, which is what I would do every day, and just write. I got monologue jokes on, you build a portfolio. So hopefully you you work somewhere where people want to help you. Like that's a good boss. Somebody that's happy for your success and is happy when you quit because you got a better gig is my definition of a good boss. And when you find one, you know,
Enjoy it.
work hard for them, and hopefully it's reciprocal.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, so, very cool. Yeah, I'm just marinating. So getting into the TRL days, at what point, like, I haven't, like, when do you think that started?
So
Late 90s, right?
you're like, holy, are you catching my cough?
Yeah, it's weird. I'm
like, yeah, we'll edit that out. My cough. Yeah, there was a point where we were like, holy shit, we're closing down Times Square with, 5,000 screaming teenage girls. So it started, it was insane. I started with MTV production, so I was a writer there working on like Spring Break and all sorts of highbrow content. And then we used to do this thing every summer where MTV would go to like some summer place. So it was Seaside Heights, New Jersey. Mm-hmm. And I remember Carson Daly had just joined, and he was like a DJ out in LA, but came to New York. And he would hosting this sort of countdown show of videos, and I was working on a show where we were doing more like segments, and the head of news, and I'll name check here, Dave Sorolnik, had a brilliant idea, smushed the two together to create a video countdown show that also brings in guests and does other fun segments and always celebrates the fan. And that was sort of the summer of 97.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken. And then we came back to New York and like, this is, you're working there now. And I'm like, okay, I'm just happy to have a job. And so started doing, working on TRL. And I think it was either shortly after they did this Wanna Be a VJ contest, which was like...
I remember, yes.
So for anybody out there that doesn't, MTV basically did an open casting call. Mm-hmm. Thousands of people coming in. We would do a quick audition tape, and basically America was going to choose the next VJ, which I don't even think they call them that anymore, but like a host on MTV. And the final two that came down were three brothers, like woman Thalia, this guy Dave Holmes, who's gone on to do some great stuff and is a fantastic writer, and Jesse Camp. And Jesse Camp won. And my assignment was to be Jesse's producer outside every day.
Oh my God. Again, like another part of my brain exploding because me and my friend...
Well, my blood pressure exploded because, that was...
How long were you with him for?
A few months, and then somebody like mercifully said, you know what, maybe there was things happening where Carson was getting bigger and I think needed somebody that could... I don't know what, just vibe with him. And so they said, why don't we try you doing that? And I was like, yes, from outside, because outside was just mayhem. And I like people, but when you're surrounded by people and you don't know what's going to happen, and then you're trying to sort of like wrangle this caged animal named Jesse, who just does what he wants.
Those jobs, hey, for a guy like me to have a shot at it, I mean, it's great, it's the best job in the world, and so, hey, I was gonna, I heard, hey, why not, right? Everyone can take a shot. What was the question?
You're like, and then you're wearing a headset. So when they say, okay, tell Jesse to do this, and Jesse does the opposite, they're not yelling at Jesse, they're yelling at you. So it was always like, you can only control so much. And then if it goes wrong, it's never going to fall on the talent, it's going to fall on the producer, which it should. That's your job. So eventually Jesse and I think had a good working relationship, but the opportunity to work with Carson, they were like, you want to try this? So I'm like, sure. And we vibe well together, think on your feet. He's Carson, so you just got to kind of roll with it. And there's nobody that I've worked with that's more talented at just synthesizing stuff on the cue card, turning it around and putting it into their own words, and just being so comfortable on camera. And that's who he, like, just, I hate that word, unflappable, but, like, that was him. And so you knew, like, it was fun because his comfort allowed
You to be comfortable.
Sometimes I'd even say, hey, no, we can't, like, if he says something or if there was a question with the guest on, I could, like, break down the fourth wall and say no, and they'd be like, wait, Sammy, what are you saying? And then the camera would turn, and I'd be there. But it was like, there was no wall. You know, it was him, and he respected fandom. And he might not have loved, like, all the music that was featured there, but he's always used the analogy, like, if I'm a bartender, I don't necessarily have to drink alcohol in order to serve you a drink. And that was it. And he was great. And I worked with him for 4 years. Like, I was there, you know, live every day. And then, you know, I think after doing 900 shows, I was like, I want to do something different. So I moved over to Nickelodeon to do public affairs, which was cool. Totally different. But we can continue with TRL. I think that's probably what people want to hear about more than well,
I mean, there was a period too where I was obsessed with Nickelodeon as well. But
yes,
I'm just
TRL is you know, it was amazing that, like, there was a point where you could just call up a record label to get information, and people would jump through hoops for you, and you were like, and never taking advantage of it, but it was just helping each other. And, you know, it was like a symbiotic relationship with, like, us, TRL, promoting the artists, and the artists wanting to be promoted. And it was really cool. And the access and the connection to fans, I think, was so unique. And I think it's a little bit lost now because everything feels so accessible that everything is so, I think, is way more curated and less spontaneous. And I think there was something so cool about being live every day at 3:30.
Like, such a unique time too. Yeah.
You know what the hell was going to happen, and it was great. Like, that was fun.
Dude, were you there when Mariah Carey, like, allegedly began her breakdown with that?
Yeah, I was there for Mariah's breakdown, for Madonna saying, and Carson said, because Madonna didn't want to come on TRL, and finally they were to book her, and then Carson's like, this isn't so bad. She said, well, you know, it's better than root canal. It was Madonna, though. You know what I mean? Like, that was the cool thing, was, like, I was always, like, kind of like, wow, this is cool. Like like, these are big, like, real people that, like, I would never get to meet otherwise, and yet I have access, and it's like, this is kind of neat, and you get to see them, and you don't take, you know, you stay professional, but you also, like, just observe. Michael Jackson, you know, we went across the street to Virgin Records when it was still there, and that was surreal. The coolest thing, though, for me was, and this is when U2 came out with, you know, the album that I think, like, I don't even know the name of the album, but it was just, like, it was the one that basically, like, right after 9/11.
Okay. Yes. Okay, I know what you're talking about, yep.
And we'll figure out what, it wasn't Achtung Baby, but it was, like, it had a, whatever, Beautiful Day. So whatever album that was. And they came on, and at the building where the MTV studios was and where the offices were, there's this balcony on the 8th floor, which is also the cafeteria. And we set up this concert, or U2 set up, they performed outside, and you can Google it, and I'm sure it's out there, but U2, TRL, and they did, like, Beautiful Day. And I remember I would always stand next to the camera person, Bobby, just because, you know, like, Carson would turn to that camera, so I was always near him with the cue card, just, like, sort of giving, where are we going? And he was lead camera right on Bono, and Bono just starts walking towards us, and we're backing up, and I'm like, it's like parting of the Red Sea, and I'm like, oh my God, this is, and I have a really good friend from home, my friend Steve, who is probably the biggest U2 fan ever. Like, he'll find out where Bono's staying when they're touring in a hotel, he'll just be in the lobby, and Bono's like, oh, you again? But I got him and his brother, like, I got them on the guest list so they could watch, because that was, you know, that was the cool thing, was, like, to, I don't know, pay back for your friends. But after U2 performed, you know, they quickly, security grabs, like, Bono, ushers him out, and we all had to head downstairs to do, like, the next segment. So I'm in an elevator with, like, Carson, Bono, like, a security person, and, like, maybe a music person. And Bono's like, so was it good? Was it okay? Like, how was it? And I'm like,
are you serious? Yeah.
Bono, like, what do you care what anybody thinks? Like, and that also made me realize, like, everybody has insecurity. I always think I wish I'd gone back when he asked that and been like, But it was kind of like it humanized. Like that was the cool thing too. Like I think that TRL humanized these people that always seemed larger than life. Actually, was. But like, yeah, for him to like give it a shit, what like I think about that, I was just like, wow, like that was like okay, and it's probably why he's successful because he actually does care, and it's not like I'm just gonna do what I do and not, get a temperature check from people. So.
Were you there when? I mean, I know you were like there, but were you like physically there when Eminem and Marky Wahlberg was there, and he was like,
Wahlberg. What's up, Mark? Billy. Eminem Mark. How you doing? All right. What's up, man? What's going on? Good to see you. Where am I supposed to go? Yeah, just chill right there.
We'll just all stand together like a happy, fun bunch.
Yeah.
Happy group.
It was, yeah, it was definitely, there was a, with Mark Wahlberg, we had like an audience coordinator, and I remember she went into the green room once just to let him know, like, you're gonna be ready to come out, and referred to him as Marky Mark. And it was like, she'd get fired, but it was like you just did something horrible if you just like said that. Like he did not wanted to move on in his life, and I get it, but it's also like,
chill.
I don't know, like can't you embrace who you were and also celebrate where you're going? And like they don't have to be like one ends and one be like there's a blurred line there that I think. But yeah, that was and I felt like Carson was in the middle there, and it was gonna be I thought there might be a fight. It felt like
attention.
Fisticuffs might ensue, but I kind of love that about Eminem though too. Like fearless in anything he did, and you have to respect it, whether or not like, and it's not like I was the biggest Eminem fan, but I respected what his craft and what he did, and like going, like just staying true to himself. And I don't think he ever like changed that, and I think a lot of the artists never changed that. Some did, but
So at what point do you exit, like stage left from MTV? Is it like after TRL has ended, which I think, because I was trying to think, like I started watching TRL when I was like 4th or 5th grade, and then I remember watching it until high school plus.
Yeah, I did like 98 to 2002. I was on TRL, and then I went to, and it was still big, but I was like, I just wanted to sort of try something new, so I went back into like the general, not working on a specific show, but working on different projects. So shot in, Nick and Jessica's home, like in Calabasas, California. They had like a big theater. We did some Valentine's Day special with them. So I would do stuff like that, or a spring break, and just be there as like a writer producer. And did that for 2 years, and then went to Nickelodeon, and then came back in 2005. My producing partner Jessica and I, who I met on TRL. That's the other great thing, is you meet people that you'll always stay in touch with. She actually introduced me to my wife. So there you go. Jessica and I, like on TRL, we were friends, and we would always like sort of riff on ideas. And she was working at MTV News and Docs, and she and I pitched a show, and News and Docs bought it. So I went back in, and she and I had a development deal for like 5 years at MTV News and Docs, pitching different show ideas. We did one about a high school newspaper called The Paper, which was really fun. And then we did another show called Hired, which was actually really cool. And I think it's still relevant. Every episode featured a different employer looking to hire somebody. And you'd start with like the headhunter looking at all the, meeting with people and helping them, giving them feedback on their resume. And then you'd narrow it down to the 3 finalists who would meet with, like we shot with Steve Madden. And so they would all meet with him, and they'd be given an assignment, come back in and pitch it. And then at the end, he'd make the call. You'd be on the other end with the, all 3 people, whether they got the job or not. And somebody would get hired at the end of each episode. So it was kind of fun. It was cool.
Oh, here, let me for 2 seconds. I'm gonna go grab as many VCRs, VHSs as I can that I taped that I want to show you.
Yes.
These are just like a couple, but like,
Hold on, yep, Together. Oh, I love Together. Watch Together. My Heart, the 80s. Michael Jackson interview, Osbourne TV, that's out. Wow. And then the bottom one, Michael Jackson, Britney.
concert, I think.
All right. And then Movie Mouse, American Dreams. Wow. Together was so ahead of its time and brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
You plus me equals us. Calculus. I mean, it's just so good.
Yes.
Chris Farley's brother was in that cast.
Yes.
I loved Together because it was fun and it wasn't mean-spirited.
Mm-hmm.
I think that everybody that was in a boy band probably appreciated it as well and could laugh. Like I think if you couldn't, then you're taking yourself too seriously.
Right.
I think like that's sort of that's where you draw the line. Like if you can't laugh at something like that, then I don't know. You're taking it seriously.
Well, what's your thoughts on kind of, and this is just my 2 cents on like what MTV's become. Do you think that just like the reality vibe took over like the actual structure of the network, or?
Yeah, I think it's a bunch of things in terms of, I think that short form content, and if you think about it, TRL was really just short form content in a long form package. Like videos, an interview, you could chop that up and just put it out there. I think that the fact that the accessibility of everything is so much different, so much easier now, that I think you have to MTV had to reinvent itself. And part of that is, there's long form programming, and you always see people saying, why don't they play videos anymore? Well, because no one would watch that though. People can get the videos anywhere. So you've got to make something that's unique and specific to your brand that people will tune into. And that tends to be reality programming. It's funny, like I haven't watched MTV and because there's not a need for me to do that. Everything is sort of a la carte now. There's something kind of sad about that, I think, too, where I think it isolates us a little bit. Mm-hmm. Where I think TRL, and this is going to be corny, but I think TRL actually brought people together, and it brought Korn fans next to Britney fans, because they were all on the platter that day. Mm-hmm. And so the fans were there rooting for theirs. You had to peacefully coexist. And there was something nice about that. That's like, you might not love the number 1 and 2 videos, but it's a democracy. People voted for it. And Korn, if you want them to be number 1, then keep voting for Freak on a Leash. And so, really, people are going to be Googling that.
Oh my God.
But I think that, it's kind of why I like that some platforms like HBO Max or Max, whatever you want to call it, like the White Lotus, doesn't release everything at once and makes us as a society, have to be somewhere at a certain time to check it out. And there's something nice about that. There's something unifying about that. It's like, and so I kind of miss that.
Yeah.
But I also realized, there's a flip side to it, which is there's a lot more opportunities out there to create that content now. Again, people can choose to consume it when they want. So it is definitely convenient. There's something to be said for that, but there's also something to be said for being inconvenienced and having to make an effort to do something. Like, must-see TV, which was a big thing with NBC in like the 90s, where when people were just starting VCR, but there was not that like on-demand generation, which is like what we have now. So it's different, but it's not like one's better than the other. It's just different.
Different.
My daughter, I have a 13-year-old daughter, so it's kind of weird now to think she'd be in Times Square. And I'm like, oh my God.
About that. Yeah, definitely.
But it's awesome because, you sort of, you stop. I think the human tendency is to stop trying new things or experiencing things. And so having somebody like my daughter controls the music in the car every day going to school, I feel like I'm tapped into a little bit of what's out there, what's interesting, and it's cool. And it's also like, again, it's like a bonding experience for us.
Do you keep in touch with other. I reached out to, and I'm blanking on the last name, but I reached out to Deb and Rob. That was at TRL.
I just texted Rob last night. There's a Facebook group. I worked at MTV when it was cool. But
like
there was a gathering. There was a gathering last night. I was going to go, and then I realized my daughter has a concert at school, so I couldn't. But Rob Dixter, who's a great producer, was there, and Deb Saba, who's amazing, who's just a great producer, and also a really good champion for everybody, and took the sign of somebody that's a good leader, somebody that you don't know if things are going well or not from the higher ups, because she was able to sort of create that buffer, and she was really good at doing that and just being supportive. And also when we did things that were good, we had The Rock host TRL once, and so one of the guys, Dave George, who's now the head of ITV, big Dave, who's a huge wrestling fan and rock fan. So, and I was writing the script, so we worked together on sort of rockisms, jabroni, folded it in, and so it felt natural. And I remember we got an email from Deb after the show saying, "Guys, you did great job today. You really made that feel like it was the Rock show, and you did something that was really special." And people they only point out when you do things wrong, and she pointed out when you do something right. And that's 4 times as important, the ratio of what you need.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But you didn't always get that. And I think some of it was people just didn't think to do it. And some of it was people were just so busy. But, sometimes you feel appreciated and it's great. And if you don't, you have to kind of just create it yourself and, appreciate others. And hopefully it sort of comes around. So.
That's nice to hear. Yeah, so I contacted them the same way I contacted you, and I think Deb's thinking about it. Rob was thank you, but no thank you.
He's Canadian, so we'll forgive him. He's a weirdo. I'll tell him I did it though.
Yeah, I was anyone.
Oh my God, he was my roommate at Woodstock '99.
Stop! Oh my God, I am obsessed with that angle.
Oh my God, did you watch that documentary with it was so, and they had some people from MTV that were there. I just remember we were on stage that first night, Carson was hosting, and people were throwing rocks and stuff.
And what do you think that was about?
I just think it was I blame the promoters, and maybe that's easy, but I think that they set up this event that was so ridiculously expensive, and ill-prepared, and you're on this Air Force base, which is just cement, and it was hot, and I saw a woman just squat and urinate in the middle of a runway. I'm this is dehumanizing, and you're charging $5 for a bottle of water when and there's not enough supplies. There was all sorts of stuff. It was a money grab. And when you do something like that, you're going to get people that are really resentful because I'm paying this much and this is what I'm getting in return. Who can I take my anger out on? And it's not going to be John Scher, who's the promoter. It's going to be, MTV's covering this. That's an easy target. So I think part of it was just an easy target.
I just remember being in 5th grade and turning MTV on at night and seeing the mud being thrown at Carson, and then I remember him kind of being hey, they're lighting fires, so we're
going backstage. Yep. And I remember and we left on Sunday, and I think the fires happened Sunday night, but we did a TRL on Sunday after late afternoon, and then just got the hell out of town, thank God. And then I remember, because we had to be back in New York the next day for TRL Live, and I remember we had Anthony Kiedis on as a guest, but I think they played Fire, which doesn't help the situation at all. It's ironic or not, or just wry sense of humor, but it was, yeah.
Well, real quick, again, I always say real quick, but literally real quick, do you blame Fred Durst, or do you think that it was just a really big tornado storm kind of thing?
I think, I just don't think it's one person. And he's, break stuff inciting that. But if the conditions weren't the way they were, people might not have been as willing to sort of follow Fred Durst, which is again, you also have to look at the fans. Like, you're choosing Fred Durst as your fearless leader, or like listening to this guy, like, he's kind of a knucklehead. So
I don't know. I could do like a whole nother episode, or even to when I was little, I was like, wait, I have Birkenstocks. What's wrong with Birkenstocks?
yeah, but you know, it's interesting because you sort of learn. I'll circle it back to what I'm doing now, but I think with time comes perspective. And I have launching a new company called Real Legacy that basically documents family stories by creating these legacy videos. So interviewing grandparents to sort of, you might not be interested in it now, but in 10 years you might want to hear sort of the family story and like what your grandparents were like as kids, or what life was like back in like the 40s and 50s. And then also you learn about your parents as well and what they were like as kids. So it's sort of like, I make these sort of, documentaries, mini documentaries that feature people that kind of want to just preserve the family story, because I think we all realize sometimes we might not be around.
Yeah.
So that's really, I've learned from interviewing enough people that like with time comes perspective, and maybe you have a different look at it. But yeah, we can blame Fred if you want.
Yeah, right. I mean, it would just, I don't know. I always found that interesting. But less than, like I said, I think it's going to cut off at any second. But Sam, thank you so much for joining me. This was.
I hope you have enough here to put together an episode. Let me know.
Absolutely. This is so exciting for me. So if you ever want to come back, or you want to, get anyone else my way, I would love it.
Will do. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. This is, like I said.
Watch Katie Black Show.